Here's what's coming up on this week's We Have Till 5 podcast.
This would have been much more powerful should he have been gone longer. But other than that, yeah, I think everybody else in this list was gone for at least a few months.
I look forward to hearing that entry and then calling you stupid. Baloney.
What do you mean baloney?
No.
This was fantastic.
No.
Nobody had any idea what was going on. I agree with you.
Look.
I agree with you 48%. But 52% of me says this is one of the best returns in wrestling.
Hey, hold on there, Scott Steiner. Don't be throwing around numbers out there like you know math, all right?
I have super kicked Adam in the face, and he's, I'm making you Janetti. I'm making you Janetti.
Coming up after the break, Andrew Kent presents his top 5 favorite pro wrestling returns here on We Have Till 5. Hey, it's at Adam Kota.
And at Matthew Sukram.
We do the Wrasslun Show podcast.
And it is tons of fun.
What happened on Raw this week? What went down on SmackDown? We're going to tell you what we think.
Who's going to win the big match at the upcoming pay-per-view? Do they still call them pay-per-views?
We run the gamut. Everything from Cuban hotel guys to bloodthirsty Canadians. My wife just texted, I'ma cut someone.
Case in point, bloodthirsty Canadians.
It's the Wrasslun Show podcast.
Streaming now on the Wrasslun Show Network.
Welcome to We Have Till 5. I'm at Adam Kota. Joining me always is Andrew Kent. Andrew, well, SummerSlam is over. The biggest party of the summer is done.
Yep.
And you weren't impressed.
I expected a little bit more fodder, I think, for this podcast. There was nothing that I could really latch on to this week, but altogether, it was a pretty good pay-per-view with some really good matches, but also, unfortunately, marred with some really disappointing matches, I think, and some disappointing booking. And I wasn't blown away by SummerSlam this year. I thought the main event was great. I thought that Nakamura might have just had his worst ever wrestling match.
That's saying something.
Not necessarily his fault, and not Jinder's fault either, I don't think. I'm not blaming anybody. I think it was a boring wrestling match.
Do you hear that, fans? Andrew Kent blames you. Specifically, if you were in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center, Andrew Kent says it is your fault.
It is your fault.
SummerSlam
was a
that
bust.
he found it subpar. So hit him up at Smarks Anonymous.
Yeah, please do.
And tell him how much he sucks.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was an incredibly mediocre card that luckily sent everybody home with some really great matches. I thought that despite being maybe a little bit too much Shane McMahon, the AJ Styles Kevin Owens match was really good. Thought that it was a little bit too involved by the referee, like we were talking, it would have been last week, talking about the Triple H special guest referee in the Daniel Bryan John Cena match, and man, he was invisible. You didn't know he was there. Now there was a purpose for that, but I thought that the spot in that match, though, with the foot in the ropes and him counting the 3 and immediately nixing it, I thought that was a great spot. Gives some legitimate conspiracy theory thoughts to Mr. Kevin Owens. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. But other than that, I thought it was a kind of a lackluster pay-per-view.
A little uninspiring.
I think it wasn't the worst pay-per-view I've ever seen, and I wasn't super disappointed in it, but I thought that the Baron Corbin that match was just, you could tell John Cena didn't care about that match.
You smarks are never satisfied.
No, like, he just didn't look like he cared. Like, be honest, man. Like, I'm not.
Hey man.
Sorry.
John Cena always cares
about the kids.
He does care about the kids quite a bit.
He doesn't always care about the product.
You seen that commercial where he's reading the thank you notes?
Yeah.
Dude, like a baby.
Are you crying right now?
I'm sorry.
I think he's crying right now. Listeners, Adam Kota is crying.
He never gives up.
He never surrenders. Oh, that's something else.
He never gives up. And one guy that has never given up on us is G. Jones.
G. Jones.
We call him the OG Network fan.
Yes.
And he inspired you.
Yeah.
I want to make this clear. G. Jones.
Yeah.
At G. Jones.
At G. Jones.
G-J-O-N-Z. At G. Jones. At G. Jones.
At G. Jones.
He inspired you more than this year's SummerSlam.
Yes, he did.
G. Jones, congratulations.
Thank you, G.
Well
Jones.
done. Because you took his suggestion.
I did.
And that is our topic.
Yeah.
This week.
So he had posed the question to, was it specifically to Jeff Tahan of the go home spot, or was it to anybody, and Jeff took it upon himself to answer it about Paige?
I'm not sure. I don't remember. I think it was kind of in general. But
okay. Well,
Jeff's a big Paige fan, so that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, he had asked us how we would rebook, how we would book Paige's return. Jeff gave his ideas. I thought they were great ideas, but I mean, unfortunately, they can't work anymore because Naomi lost the title. But I thought he gave some great ideas last week. You should listen to it on the Wrasslun Show Network. The Go Home Spot with Jeff Tahan. Streaming now. We need to whisper that more often. But he asked a kind of a part two to that, was to specifically to our podcast. That maybe we should do the top 5 return storylines, and that's what I've done. My top 5 wrestling returns is what I'm working on this
now.
week.
I need you to clarify here your criteria, because there's a lot of people out there, I think, who immediately think of certain angles, and if you leave them off the list, you're going to have some angry fans, not just the ones that you called peons at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn.
Not my words. Listen here, Brooklyn. You're the last people I want on my back heat-wise. I said nothing of the sort. He has put words in my mouth, and I'm quite frankly embarrassed for him.
Well, I'm going to give you the opportunity to have the words come from the horse's mouth, if you will, by letting you explain your criteria for the top 5.
So my top 5 was guys who had either left the company or had been injured or had... I don't think I have anybody currently on this list that like straight debut. So you won't see Chris Jericho on this. His debut
in the WWF. So
WWF.
This would fall along the lines of, say, using Chris Jericho as an example. Sorry if this is on the list and I'm ruining one for you. His 2008 return, where he just showed up out of nowhere.
Exactly.
For example.
That sort of situation.
So for the criteria, they have to have been at one time with the company and left television for an extended period of time.
There is one on this list that the only problem is he was not gone an extended enough period. This would have been much more powerful should he have been gone longer. But other than that, I think everybody else in this list was gone for at least a few months.
I look forward to hearing that entry and then calling you stupid.
There we go.
Let's break it down with your first entry. Number 5, Andrew.
Number 5 is we're going right back to SummerSlam already. I'm ready. SummerSlam 2010. Daniel Bryan's return to the WWE following his very real life firing.
This was a really cool moment.
This was an awesome moment,
and I would dare say did more for Daniel Bryan than it ever would have for him to stay on TV as part of that Nexus group. Yep. So it's just one of those situations that goes to show you that life is not always a straight line. It has ups and downs, and thankfully that was a path.
The law of undulation, says C.S. Lewis.
Wow, there you go. I'm too stupid to remark on that. Well done.
In your face, man. Just say Wembley, and everything will be okay.
G. Jones.
So this right here, I have never been more disappointed in wrestling on a superficial level than, obviously there's been lots of real life things to be disappointed in wrestling about, but on a superficial storyline basis than Daniel Bryan's firing following the Nexus attack. I thought everything was perfect and beautiful, and when I read that, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a work. And I was convinced for like weeks that it was a work. he was fired. He was legitimately fired for choking Justin Roberts with his tie. And I don't know, there was lots of speculation that because he was that sort of Chris Benoit type wrestler, and he was similar to Chris Benoit's size, and he was goofy looking like Chris Benoit was, and he choked him the way that Chris Benoit allegedly killed himself. And I heard that there was a lot of comparisons that it was because of the Daniel Bryan Chris Benoit comparison that they had to fire him. I don't think I buy that. I think it was just apparently too violent on TV.
I think the word fired should be used in quotation marks.
Fair enough.
It was really clear and obvious that they had every intent of bringing Daniel Bryan back once the heat died down a little.
Absolutely.
Same situation with Finlay when he was fired as an agent for something ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And then once the heat died down, they brought him back again. But what a way to bring him back, Andrew. Set the stage for us.
Well, so he's been gone, I think he must have been gone a full 2 months. I think,
well, let's see. Nexus debuted.
How do you just know this stuff?
I don't, actually. This is why I'm trying to think.
Oh, gotcha.
The first pay-per-view they had any involvement in was Fatal 4-Way, which was a June pay-per-view. So it would have been in late May or early June. So yeah, you're right, about 2 months.
About 2 months. So he'd been gone from the company for about 2 months. And he'd been doing indie dates, and he made those really awesome Obama-esque shirts that instead of saying change, it said violent, and had a picture of his face. And I would honestly, Daniel Bryan, I know you listen to this podcast, so please, I will give you, just tweet me, slide up in my DMs, and I'll give you my address for you to pop by with a t-shirt. But so he's gone off and had this really cool indie run. And as far as I know, this right up until the moment was not spoiled anywhere until the WWE spoiled it on Twitter like an hour before the event that he was coming back.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that happening.
Apparently, and I don't remember that either, thank goodness. It must have not went out far. But so it's a 7-on-7. John Cena's amassed this crew to fight the Nexus.
What a crew.
What a team. What a mishmash of people.
Excuse me.
Edge, Chris Jericho.
Hall of Famer. Chris Jericho, future Hall of Famer. Bret Hart, current Hall of Famer. John Cena, the freaking man. Who else was on the team? That four itself. You could have just had that four. R-Truth.
John Morrison.
Excellent rapper and WWE Studios star.
And John Morrison, who he's kind of built a name back up for himself, but he was not my favorite wrestler.
I'll still say future Hall of Famer.
But do you know who was on? John Morrison. You're calling it? You're calling it on August 24th, 2017, right here in North Bay, Ontario. You're calling that John Morrison is a future WWE Hall of Famer.
I'll say John Morrison is far too talented for WWE to ignore him forever, and I think we have not seen the last of him in WWE.
I think you're right about that.
And I think once he has time to mature and get more experience, I think he'll be there, and I think he's got all the tools necessary to go the distance.
Hey, I don't necessarily disagree, but in 2010, I disagree.
Sure, fair enough.
And then, but Great Khali was on this team, so, but luckily, Great Khali,
former world champion.
Oh, don't remind me of
hero in India.
Oh, Lord.
Brother-in-law to Jinder Mahal. Okay, and as we all know, we don't hinder the Jinder on this network.
We don't hinder Jinder. So, Great Khali, kayfabe hurt. They need a replacement. They do a great thing where they tease the Miz first because they'd been bugging Miz for a little while to be on the team, and Miz wouldn't commit. So they're like, and John Cena comes out and he's like, "I'm the new member. The new member of team WWE is," and Miz's music hits, and everybody's like, the room just like deflates. And John's like, no, not you. It's Daniel Bryan. And the place explodes, and then he just walks down with a scowl on his face and just leads the charge.
To paraphrase from Chris Jericho, Hockey Highlights #3 plays over
my God.
The most generic theme music.
That music was so bad. I just listened to it because I could have sworn that at least the original, when he just started, I forgot that he didn't immediately start using the overture.
The Valkyries. But I'll tell you something. What wasn't terrible was his performance that night. Taps out, if I'm not mistaken, 2 members of the 7 members on the team. And I think he lasted pretty long.
He was there for a little while, yeah, for sure.
So a great kickstart. After that, of course, it starts his feud with The Miz. They pick right up where they left off on the original season of NXT. And we're off to the races towards building a future world champion and Yes, I will go on record now. Hall of Famer. I will call it. I will call that one.
So bold.
Very controversial. Very controversial.
Adam, you were so bold to say that Daniel Bryan's a future Hall of Famer. Although I don't know if there would ever be a guy with a less tenured WWE career that will make it into the Hall of Fame.
That's a good point. Something to ponder as we take a break. When we come back, some more from Andrew Kent.
Some people listen to their podcast in the car. Me, I record mine in the car. So join me, Jeff DeHaan, for the Go Home Spot. It's where I'll talk everything from NXT, Raw, SmackDown, or whatever other wrestling-related stuff swims through my head. So join me for the Go Home Spot, only on the Wrasslun Show Network.
Number 4, Andrew.
Number 4, we're going back to November 19th edition of Monday Night Raw in the year 2001. Do you know what happened on November 19th, 2001 on Monday Night Raw?
Well, if memory serves me correctly, that was the night after Survivor Series.
Sure was.
Which meant you could be talking about 2 different people on this list.
Well, I'm going to give you a hint. You guys talked about him a little bit last week on the Wrasslun show.
Since we didn't talk about the legendary Hall of Famer, Jerry the King Lawler, we must be talking about Hall of Famer, the only 2-time Hall of Famer.
Woo!
We are talking about the Nature Boy.
We're talking about the
So
Nature Boy.
why this one on the list?
Well, this one made the list for me because I just remember this moment so well. It's from the period that I just kind of started watching wrestling. I'd heard about Ric Flair, but I didn't know too much about him. I knew that he was a WCW guy. I knew that he was a legend over there. I knew that he was a former WWF champion. I knew all these things. And then to see him walk out on stage for me as a kid was, for some reason, super spectacular. It was fantastic. And the crowd popped big. And it was a great angle that came out of it. 'Cause who didn't hate Vince McMahon in 2001, especially if you're 13 years old, right? Like, I hated Vince McMahon and I hated Kurt Angle, and I couldn't believe that Vince McMahon was coming out to just hand Kurt Angle the WWF title. I know that Stone Cold was a bad guy and he was working with WCW, but he was still Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he's the champ. He's the rightful champ. How can you possibly give him the title? How can you take the title away from him? And Ric Flair comes down to save the day. And just cuts a Ric Flair promo.
I will give you 3. I want to say 3 things about this.
Yes.
Despite what the other 2 things I'm about to say, I agree with you. This is a great return, and it definitely deserves to be on this list. But I could not help but feel a little angry when this happened as well, because my first thought was, we just had an entire WCW feud.
That's so true.
And you couldn't bring in Ric Flair then?
Yeah.
You had to bring him in afterwards? Also, I want to talk about, can we talk about Vince pulling on his ear?
Oh my God.
Vince's facial reactions to "the consortium was me" is maybe one of the greatest reactions from Vince McMahon in history.
I don't understand why he went so slapstick with it, but I'm glad that he did. And I have no idea.
Wait a minute. You don't know why Vincent Kennedy McMahon went slapstick? This is a guy that nearly had a heart attack every time he called a Savio Vega match.
I hope there was just enough air on that to just sort of let that land before I burst. That's amazing. Yeah, no, you're right.
Was that joke so meta that it actually took a minute to think about it?
It just took a minute to to eat up.
I just had to marinate there.
I loved it. So Ric Flair, when he came to Raw, even as a young wrestling fan, I knew how huge that was. I knew how big that was for the company. I didn't know enough about business to really think like, oh, why didn't you bring him in months ago? The invasion could have been bigger. You know, for me, this is a huge moment. And as I'm looking towards this list, because there's a couple people who I wish were on this list, who I couldn't quite put on this list, that we'll talk about in the honorable mentions afterwards, simply because it was either announced that they were coming back or they didn't stick around. It was kind of a one-off. So having Ric Flair come in and that he's being part of the WWE for quite a while post this, and this was a big moment for me, and I knew how big it was even when I was 13.
Number 3, Andrew.
Number 3 is one of my all-time favorite angles in wrestling history. It's what I wish, honestly, if I had a time machine, I'd go back and I'd wipe my freaking memory and go watch this from the first bit. WCW makes this list. We've talked about this before and we have till 5. This is Dean Malenko returning at WCW Slamboree 1998.
Well, you wanted something controversial, folks? There it
we
is.
go.
Dean Malenko makes number 3 on
makes
this list.
I think this is one of the most fantastic wrestling storylines ever. He's feuding with Chris Jericho, he being Dean Malenko. Dean Malenko's father, I believe, passes away and he has to take a hiatus from wrestling, understandably. Chris Jericho then takes it upon himself to continue the feud for the next 2 months. Without Dean Malenko on TV. Out of this comes the man of 1,004 holds. Out of this comes the Dean Malenko's picture is more charismatic than him. He's putting down Dean Malenko's father just to build the emotional drama for this match. And then at Slamboree, there's a battle royal. And the winner of this battle royal determines who would face Jericho for the Cruiserweight Championship immediately following this match. So, in this match is this guy, he's calling, Chris Jericho announces everybody coming down, hilariously, of course, because it's Chris Jericho. And there's this one fellow who he says, oh, this up-and-comer, his name's Cyclope. Cyclope?
You said it right, but you also said it the way Jericho probably said it.
That's fair. That's fair.
Given his pertinence for screwing up names. That's on
funny.
purpose.
Yeah. Kirk Angel. Chris Benoit.
I always like Stinko Malenko.
Stinko Malenko's hilarious. That one's good. So it gets down to 2. Cyclope is with Juventud Guerrero, and there's this moment where they're both staring each other down, and it's really intense. And all of a sudden they shake hands, and Juventud hops over the top rope, eliminating himself in the battle royal, and nobody can figure out what's going on. And all of a sudden, this guy pulls his mask off. And it's Dean Malenko, and the crowd goes freaking mental. All of a sudden, everything Chris Jericho said in the last 2 months has come back. The fact that his father passed away, everybody piles on and just continues to cheer for him. Chris Jericho gets freaked out. He does that thing where he get that cartoonish look in his face. He doesn't want to fight anymore, doing the Ric Flair hands out, and then Dean Malenko whoops him for the next 5 to 10 minutes and takes the Cruiserweight Championship. It's honestly, I think it's one of the best told stories in wrestling, and it's a big reason as to why I think Chris Jericho is going to always be a dark horse for the possibly the greatest of all time. Can you add anything? Can you?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to do is agree with you.
I love being able to defend my controversial picks so well that Adam can't look at me after and say it should have been the Heavenly Bodies.
I'm not giving you the credit.
Should have been the Steiners and the Heavenly Bodies.
Well, that I'll fight you on the moon over. You know that, but I'm going to count this as a win for Dean Malenko.
Yes,
not for you. Dean Malenko.
Thanks, Dean.
Dean Malenko gets the point.
I'm giving you a thumbs up into the microphone, Dean Malenko.
And all of you get a break.
Yeah,
and we'll be back with the final 2. Hey, it's at Adam Conta.
Hey, I'm Drew Ferris.
We came up with the idea for this show, Ropes to Reels, where we talk about movies that have something to do with wrestling.
Could be anything. Could be the story. Could be the plot. Could be one of the executive producers. It's just got to rope around somehow to professional wrestling.
We're going to review everything from the Scorpion King to Ready to Rumble.
From The Wrestler to Scooby-Doo WrestleMania Mystery.
So grab your popcorn
and put on your elbow pads.
And join us in the theater of the mind every week for Ropes to Reels.
Streaming now on the Wrasslun Show Network.
All right, Andrew. It's time for your runner-up. The one that didn't quite make it to the top.
This one, I don't know if it could have. I don't know if it's better than number 1. But it would have been a tighter race because I think my number 1 was always my number 1. But this one would have been closer. This is the one that he should have stayed away a little longer. And that's WWE's fault, not this guy's fault.
Okay.
This was July 25th edition of Raw in 2011.
If you say what I think you're going to say, you and I might have to take a trip to the moon, sir.
Let's do it, because this is my boy CM Punk.
Baloney.
What do you mean baloney?
No.
This was fantastic.
No.
Nobody had any idea what was going on. Nobody had any idea.
How long was he gone?
He was
How
gone
long
1
was
week.
he gone? 1
He was gone 1
week.
week. But it was an important week, a very strange week. He was at Comic-Con putting down Triple H and the entire company. He showed up at an independent wrestling promotion wearing the WWE Championship. Nobody had it. Was, and that's what I mean. This one would have been possibly the greatest return in wrestling history if he had stayed away for 3 months.
Woulda, shoulda, coulda. He was gone for such a short length of time that even putting that belt in his fridge, it had still not cooled off from Money in the Bank. That's how short a period he was gone.
I can't disagree with you that this had not even remotely been given enough time to marinate. It was not given anywhere near enough time to marinate. But it kept the hottest angle in wrestling in years going.
I protest.
I wish this return wasn't so good so that I could agree with you fully. I agree with you.
Look,
I agree with you 48%. But 52% of me says this is one of the best returns in wrestling.
Hey, hold on there, Scott Steiner. Don't be throwing around numbers out there like you know math, all right? Tell the listeners why you put this at number 2, because I'm going to tune out. Nothing you say, nothing you could say at this point is going to convince me that not only does this deserve to be on this list, but at number 2, give me a break, sir. Allow me to go into full Gorilla Monsoon mode here. Give me a break. Will you stop?
Well, CM Punk, Adam Conta, I'm listening.
No, I'm done.
Talking to you right now.
I am done.
In your eyes.
You can
tell me right now.
Tell G Jones this is his fault.
G Jones, you have broken up the band, sir. I have super kicked Adam in the face, and he's I'm making you Janetti. I'm making you Janetti.
Just wait till I hit the rocker drop and paralyze you.
Come on, man. This is gotta be one of the coolest returns, and nobody had any idea what was going on. It needed more time to marinate. I cannot stress that enough, but there was enough confusion. They caused enough confusion in that week away that I think people really truly didn't know what was going to happen. And I think for that confusion, for that realism, for that reality, CM Punk could have just walked away with the title, and we didn't know. And when he shows back up, I think it's a cool moment. That's all I gotta say.
You done?
I'm finished.
Good. Let's move on to number 1 before I blow a gasket. Ridiculous. All right, give me number 2, because I'm not even counting that last one as a number on the list.
We go all the way back to Raw on July 25th, 2011, when CM Punk came back.
Don't you make me dive across this table and strangle you.
This is the most fun I've had all week. Number 1. This was amazing. And I think every fan from the Attitude Era felt the same way I did. On February 14th, 2011, finally, The Rock has come back home.
Now, I want you to break this down because The Rock has returned to WWE several times.
Yes.
And quite frankly, I am flabbergasted that you did not pick the return that I thought you were going to pick, which would make my number 1.
Ooh, which one?
Well, tell you what, I will save that for a little bit later on. I want to keep the focus on your pick because I'm going to give you the opportunity to convince me otherwise on this.
I only need a few words for that.
Please do.
It was the first time in 7 years.
All right.
I honestly, I don't think that he had cooler return. I'm having, for some reason, I'm having a hard time. You might have to, my mind might have to be changed, because I can't remember another memorable Rock return since, but I trust you and I trust your memory. But for me, I don't know, first time in 7 years, and I didn't know. Did you know The Rock was coming back that night to host WrestleMania 27?
No, certainly not.
I hadn't heard anything, and there was speculation from everyone, from like from like Bob Barker to Snooki to Shawn Michaels. There was so much speculation, and when the lights go down and then the Tron starts lighting up, and then all of a sudden, If You Smell blares over the radio, and all of a sudden, there he is. It's The Rock. It's The Rock. For the first time in 7 years, he's on television, and he cuts a beautiful promo. And when he said The Rock has come home, I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody who claims to be a wrestling fan in 1998 to 2002 that wouldn't have got goosebumps and maybe a little tear, maybe a little tear in their eye.
It was a great return. I certainly would never, ever, ever dispute that any time The Rock has come back that it was ever anything less than a spectacle. Mm-hmm. But if I may,
please,
how can you put that and any of the 5 on your list over the magic of January 4th, 2010? Your hero came home, the prodigal son. I'm sorry to build it up, but I mean, I really feel, honestly, I'll always remember the night that Bret Hart came home. Yeah. To me, that is the greatest return in the history of professional wrestling because it was so unfathomable to anybody who grew up in that Attitude Era and was a part of that screw job and saw what happened. Yeah. We thought it would never, ever happen. And not only for Bret to return was big enough, but for him to embrace Shawn Michaels. It
was very heavily considered. It really was. For me, I don't know. I think I just sort of I think I feel a little sad when I think about Bret Hart coming back though, because everything that happened after was kind of bad. Like,
amazing
really,
storytelling, like kind of incredible catharsis. Yes, I don't like. Listen, I get it if you feel that way, but for me, that is triumph. That to me is a triumph of moment. And I know that a lot of people feel like the Bret and Vince thing was great at the end, which it was. To me, the hug with Shawn was the moment to me because of their history before the screw job and then after it. Plus, I loved everything up to the WrestleMania match that him and Vince had. The match itself was garbage, but the build up to it, the story, the storytelling was incredible. I loved everything about it. And it all started with January 4th. Now, I mean, I'm not going to say this was a reason, but this is also the night that Impact Wrestling first went live to go head to head. And it kind of felt like not just Bret Hart had returned. A little bit of that magic. I know there's people laughing out there right now, but let's face it.
I hate agreeing with you, but I agree with you. I remember thinking that same thing.
That night, man, it wasn't just the return of Bret Hart. There was a little bit of that Monday Night War magic because it was like for the first time.
The WWE had to try.
Since 2001, we had 2 shows competing head-to-head live. 2 wrestling shows, both with huge returns or surprise debuts. And it was an incredible, incredible night. So listen. As the format of the show
1B.
always,
we'll call that 1B.
As the format of the show always lists, it is your list, Andrew. But I did want to. I feel like I would have been doing Bret Hart, dare I say, Canada a disservice if I didn't at least.
I'm sorry for
bring
thinking
up
the
my
angle was
favorite.
sad, Bret Hart. Please,
okay.
I'm still a huge fan.
It's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Your list is fantastic. I got nothing against The Rock. The Rock's amazing. He's just not as good as Bret Hart.
I agree with you.
Well, that's going to do it for this week. Andrew, anything you want to mention before we wrap it up here?
Just, if you have any more suggestions, hit me up on Twitter at SmarksAnonymous at We Have Till 5. I'd love to not have to think about what I'm going to do next week.
We just proved 2 things. 1, we listen to our fans. And 2, Andrew Kent is pretty lazy.
Hey, I'll do the legwork. I'm just not creative.
Fair enough.
That's the problem. That's why I'm hoping something has to happen at SummerSlam to give me an idea.
Well,
Nothing happened.
There you go.
I could do most underwhelming pay-per-views. I feel like that's most of WWE's catalog.
That's your call to action. Please come up with a better idea than that for Andrew next week. And until next week, I'm at Adam Kota. And for our host, the illustrious Andrew Kent.
Bring more. Say more.
That's it. We're done here.
We're breaking the hold.